Tiziana Tambosso, Region 8 Vice Chair for Technical Activities, and I have the pleasure to share this keynote section. I would like to introduce our distinguished speaker, Monique Morrow. She has over 25 years of experience as a global technology leader, and she holds several industry advisory positions. Among them, Monique is on the board of directors of the AI company, My Unique Brain. Monique's expertise is on cybersecurity, privacy, mobile payments, ethics in extended reality, and distributed ledger technologies, for example, blockchain. She has worked across the industry and also has been active in the startup community. She is a venture partner at Spark Labs Accelerator for cybersecurity and blockchain. And she also active in the humanitarian field. She's president and co-founder of the Humanized Internet, a Swiss-based not-profit for a focus on digital identity and ethics in technologies. In ethics of technology, she also the chair of the working group on the new standard IEEE P7030 on global extended reality. And she has a long CV. You can find this on the website. I will just only to remember that she is also recognized several times. And in 2025, she received the award as a Women in Tech with Global Technology Leadership. I have a real pleasure to ask Monique to take the stage to talk about the future of engineering talent in a transforming global market. For questions, please use the chat. At the end, we will try to answer all the questions according to the time schedule. Thank you. And Monique, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Tiziana, and thank you, everybody. I hope that you're enjoying the IEEE Fair and Jobs Fair. It's so much going on. In this presentation, I will just say there is a future, and the future in engineering talent. You need to be the holder of your future, not just organizations. So we're going to talk about certain topics here in terms of how we wish to proceed. One is the introduction. The agenda I have kind of put together is the introduction background, what we need to think about in these dynamic global times. We cannot control the geopolitics, but we must be aware of the geopolitical situations and what is beholding upon us. The global market dynamics are going to be very, very key. Everybody's talking about AI and the workforce and its transformation, which is a huge topic today, but we need to be always ahead of the curve. I will always argue, coming as Tiziana introduced, cybersecurity and digital trust is very, very key, foundational in whatever we do, especially newer forms of cybersecurity, how we kind of combine that with artificial intelligence or machine learning. And sustainability in engineering is always about, how do we deal with it in a climate-friendly way? Because there is so much going on with our climate, and it's not just about going to space or outer space, but how do we take care of what we have today? The skills for 2030 is going to be very interesting. I think you're going to see an intersectionality between there's a whole ethical component of it, but there's also anthropologies, the social sciences are going to be very key. You will find those skills actually represented in the two groups that I chair, the IEEE Ethics and Extended Reality and 7030 and also Ethics and Metaverse Operational Systems. But I do say there are opportunities before us. And I will think that we need to have recommendations that we come together. And also, I always end it with some kind of call to challenge to actually action. Why does this matter? Why does it matter? Engineering is always going to matter. It's so foundational, but there's something happening. We could say it's maybe exponential. Hindsight is always 2020. When we think about the origins of AI, we talk about over 80 years ago, but it's also becoming quite exponential. And we have to absolutely think about the climate imperatives around us, the concerns that we have. So everything that we think about, if you put AI together, the people are actually organizations. There is an actual uproar about the use of these data centers and the drain on water, the drain on energy. So you have to think about other examples of use of technologies like AI, perhaps like small language learning models rather than big language learning models, which are becoming quite interesting. Geopolitical change is upon us. It's always been, I will argue, it has always been upon us. And cybersecurity threats are becoming more and more and more and more. Um, I would say menacing, and it's like your voice is no longer your voice anymore. Who do you pick up the phone? Your voice is recorded. There's just so much going on in the threat sphere. And so, as I said before, I'm going to emphasize always that cybersecurity is really key upon us. And we need to, it's also about how you retain and attract, if you're a company, your talent, but it's also about you as engineers. I will argue you need to be responsible for your own career, not the organizations per se. I have worked for at companies, very good companies, always, but I always had to take chances and responsibility in my own career. What Tiziana did not say is that I'm a PhD candidate in cyber psychology. And cyber psychology actually combines these intersectionality of threats and also digital spheres in terms of looking at, how do we create new models for what this could look like in a digital world, and putting ourselves in terms of the form of somebody that could be a miscreant actor. But talent is really, really, really key. Not, I know it's not only the global demand, it's also what's happening in our own sector, whether it's Europe, in the Middle East, and Africa. We're looking at global demand for engineering talent is huge. I was recently traveling for my unique brain in the United States. We were looking at uh, there's a hunger for talent in this space and growth of that talent, but it's also around infrastructure, and it's also around these areas of what is digital infrastructure, what is cloud, what does that mean per se. The infrastructure is core to what we have, especially if you think about what operates the internet today. People are looking at newer forms of security. They're looking at also, areas that are going to be something to yet to be actually standardized and perhaps yet to be invented. People are looking at quantum X, quantum Y, and so on and so forth. So I would say that market is so exciting in this area. But what needs to happen is not only what you put to say in your in your university or your studies, but what have you done actively to create something? Because companies are looking for what you've done, right? It's not what you've studied. It's not all of that. People will, that's your low-hanging fruit. It's more or less, what have you have to offer? What's your value add proposition, and so on and so forth. This is very important because it's a two-way street of how that works. But if we move and shift to AI in the workforce, I mean, I don't like to put up so many charts because they can be always argued, but it's really redefining how we think about the innovation cycles and what it is around the future around our skills. What we can see is there's this upgrowth trend really, really around AI, agentic AI, agentic X, agentic Y, agentic security, agentic, et cetera. Agentic, even look at banking institutions are looking at how they can manage your wallets or your banks or your finances through agentic interactions. And that, for me, as you can imagine, creates sort of red flags in terms of, well, how do you actually control, how do you actually look at what happens in an area of where responsibility and intentionality are, and who is actually going to be accountable, or what entities are going to be accountable at the end of the day. So while people may think it's a hype, I don't argue that it's a hype. I would argue that it's been here. We used to call it sort of artificial intelligence. We used to call it network management, or so. But think about it. What's going to be automated will be automated. You have to think about, in my opinion, how do you disrupt your own job? How do you disrupt your own position? How do you create a new position? Like, for example, I'm a PhD candidate in the cyber psychology. How do you create new disciplines and areas? And that is the excitement of where I see is an area of things to tap into. And that's exciting for me. And you will always see around the cybersecurity space areas that are going to be very foundational in terms of security by design and its practices. While it looks like it's a downturn, it's actually more than that. One could argue that it's not. It's actually perhaps an intersectionality or an embedment with cybersecurity and various bases of security, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's at the software level, whether it's quantum X, quantum Y, to various formats of learning, whether it's machine learning, various formats of artificial intelligence constructs. And I think that's where we're going to see some interesting interactions. We're seeing it already in my own opinion. And I think I will always argue that your security postures are going to, and your privacy postures are going to be extremely, extremely important when we're talking about areas of the cybersecurity and digital resilience construct. And we have to make that foundational in anything that we do. In the sustainability and engineering leadership format, there is, energy efficiency in whatever we do has to be part of the dialogue. Energy efficiency in some form of sustainability, which kind of breaks down into all kinds of areas and spaces. This is not really a downturn. I would say it's more of an opportunity that we have to actually consider. So I wouldn't look at a downturn more than as an opportunity, as macro geopolitical discussions are occurring. We have to think about how we design for energy efficiency. How do we design for what is going to be important for our climate in terms of these systems not damaging the climate? I mean, you think about what's happening in oceans, for example, oceanic engineering as an interesting space. What's happening in that area? And so, one of the discussions to have as you're designing is what not only think about the security postures per se, but also how are we energy efficient and how are we not damaging the environment, the earth around us, let alone what's happened, which is very, very fragile, as we can well imagine. And I think these are great opportunities for us to consider. You will hear me in the introduction. Tiziana also said I am actually a president, co-founder of the Humanized Internet. In fact, I'm wearing one of its shirts today. The Humanized Internet is always around thinking about what is human-centered. In fact, I actually wrote a book around this particular area, and it's called The Humanized Internet, Digital, Its Dignity, Digital Identity, and Democracy. And it's really around the topics that I'm discussing, including ethics per se. And so, whatever we do, there are humans that are designing for this, or some facets of humans. It's not the fact that humans are actually going to, be eliminated. There is a human-centered, everybody's talking about responsible AI. There's this centricity component around it. And with that human-centered, this is where I get very excited, is the topic around ethics and what is accessible, what is accessible to people who may be challenged from a hearing perspective or from a vision perspective. What does that mean? What does it mean for inclusion, especially if you, from a neurosciences perspective, in terms of thinking about autism as examples, and looking at the societal or assessing in a framework the societal impact per se. So human-centered innovation, this is not just a bubble. There's a lot of folks talking about it now. And most recently, you could imagine the Pope actually came in on this particular topic about his the encyclical around Humanitas, the whole area specific to AI, but specific to looking at uh, responsibility in these technologies and the whole corner of human centricity, not to forget that we are humans at the end of the day. So if you each one of these components can be broken down, and while ethics is contextual per se, it's always going to be contextual. The whole issue is sort of the Hippocratic oath that physicians have, which is do no harm. And that's a question to ask, whenever you're developing. It's not, there's this polarity when you're working at a company, revenue, what is revenue generating, and also what would be the harm per se? What would be the impact per se? And that's always going to be a polarity to ask yourselves where that do no harm can be. The landscape is exciting, quite frankly, in my opinion, and I think where I play, for example, on boards or the component of governance, what does governance look like? Where's the accountability? It's not enough to read a bunch of legal documents and say, the company frees itself. Somehow, some area, somewhere, you've got to look at where we are accountable. When we release these technologies or develop these technologies per se, whether it is for a business perspective organizationally, as board, as CEOs, as engineers, where does that accountability lie? And there's a new growth, particularly in that space. There is an organization, for example, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP, that has tests in these areas, is talking about AI governance. And the role that I play, being on the board of My Unique Brain, which is an AI company per se, particularly targeted to education in colleges, universities, is the whole area around governance. This is the whole area there that is very, very key. And having spoken to somebody quite recently at lunch, the gentleman said, that could be a thankless job, but somebody has to do it. So it's a great space to be in. Systems engineering is always going to be with us. We create systems, whether it's in space, whether it's in oceans. It's always very, very key because it's all around systems thinking, and that does not go away. Cybersecurity in its various formats, coupled with various what we think about learning and artificial intelligence, that whole intersectionality is going to be foundational when we're thinking about quantum security and quantum X and quantum infrastructure and a quantum internet eventually. Um, the thing of it is that it's so foundational. And also in terms of how voice recognition is being done, patterns in speaking, patterns in behavior, deep fakes, the whole issue about what is real, what's not, and the use of visuals. There's a whole keen opportunity of space to tap in here. Of course, sustainability, but I would argue that is a low hanging fruit in terms of impact to your environment, impact to energy, and what is efficient rather than what is draining. Having a data analytics background or data analytics, somebody has some, and you have to be able to think about forming together, whether or not it is with the use of learning and learning algorithms, whether or not it's with that. Think of it as there has to be an interpretation that says these are false positives or these are not, and there has to be an interpretation where the human can be brought into the loop of that thinking. So the skill sets these are just a snapshot, in my opinion, of what are skill sets. Ethical leadership is really key. And you're seeing that more and more, especially in organizations. When the brand of a company, of an organization, of what it is you do is broken, it's very difficult, or the trust is actually dislodged for whatever reason. It's very difficult to get your brand back. And so it's very important to talk about that do no harm aspects, what is that boundary per se in terms of thinking about these ethics which are accountable, where accountability is. And so, although contextual, it's something that we must learn to adapt to and have that Hippocratic Oath mindset in terms of engineering skills. These are examples of what I think are today's skills, but also critical skills as we move forward, and they will always be foundational in my opinion. Building, what is agile, you have to be able to, whether you're working in an organization, you as an engineer or within or an organization, you have to think about what is flexible adaptability mean. What does that mean in terms of having to have these continuous learning cultures to allow for learning? Organizations can allow for you to learn, but you, as I said before, are responsible for the end of the day. Whether you're thinking about the use of drone technology, robotics, which are quite interesting. I didn't even talk about robotics here, but foundationally, robotics are part of those skill sets that I just identified. And so, what could be the best use? And being able to combine them not from a sort of a theoretical perspective, but also from what I would call a practical perspective. So the key opportunities here, the strategic industry opportunities, as I'm coming to a close in a couple of slides, is to think about what is smart, what is intelligent, how we use that, what is trusted, what does trust look like? Trust is here. We have to think about how do we define engineering trust? I know, and especially if we're talking about identities and digital identities, not only thinking about it from a gaming perspective, which is an exciting space to look at, but if what would it be from that space, from that perspective itself? Who do I trust? Am I living in this conversation? Am I living in a filter bubble that may be a danger to myself, and I'm not aware of it? The edge is going to be extremely, people are talking about what is at the edge, especially if we're looking at edge infrastructure from a compute perspective. And so there's going to be a lot of development I think, in that space, per se. Those are the key opportunities. Security, security, security. I cannot say enough about it. And of course, the whole component of what is sustainable from an environmental and an engineering efficient perspective is what I think is key. If you don't act, I think the fail to make that investment as organizations and in yourselves, remember it's also in yourselves, there will be a risk of stagnation. Some people will argue, hey, if it isn't broken, why fix it? The thing of it is I always say, if you're very, very comfortable in your space, then it's an opportunity to disrupt yourself or disintermediate yourself. Else you I promise you, will be disintermediated. There is more and more the cybersecurity exposures, as I said before, and this will be increased if there's no action. I cannot say enough of that risk of inaction. And of course, we become a declining competition. I think also one area that I think should be of interest to us is how do we also develop our own, what I call, I used to work at Advanced Micro Devices years ago. How do you have your own sort of infrastructure, particular in that space that is out of Europe, for example, or out of the Middle East, or where, out of Africa? I think that's a really important component in terms of developing those engineering opportunities also from a silicon development perspective. I think those are kind of areas to think about. But again, risk of inaction is going to lead to stagnation and we become less competitive, which is not desirable. So my strategic recommendations as we move to our conclusion is to invest in your learning as yourselves organizationally, understand digital trust frameworks and engineering frameworks, look at how we think about that relationship between public and private, and also, again, around engineering efficiencies and around what is going to be very caring for environment per se. And everything is going to be about different constructs around digital digital ecosystems. And those are going to be real big opportunities. This is a mouthful, but again, it's quite exciting. So as we prepare for the next decade, be proactive. We're interconnected. That's one thing that we have seen. We're more and more interconnected. And it's going to be around, and that's the thing about the global markets around us, but we can actually be competitive also. And I said the future is bright. It really is bright for us all. So we all have to come together. We create these ethics constructs. We look at what we can do to be more competitive. I'm just giving you a snippet of what the art of the possible is. I'm excited for you, and I hope you're excited for yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monique, for your interesting talk. And now we have some question in the chat. Can you see the chat?
I can see the chat.
Okay.
So I have.
We can start with one of the questions because the time is not limited. So we will see if we can answer all. In any case, they can contact you directly maybe, and you can answer eventually. Is cybersecurity still of any use in the age of quantum computing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Cybersecurity, because now we call about quantum security. I mean, I also work in the mobile space, and, you have examples of mobile infrastructures actually several years ago looking at experimentation around quantum security and quantum infrastructure. So certainly that's going to be very foundational. Cybersecurity is a mouthful because it's security X, security Y. And if there is an intrusion, by the way, in terms of if I actually intrude and take over, your company, go through your company's security postures, somebody's going to be held responsible. And so I would argue that it is indeed at least low-hanging fruit. So know that space very well.
The second question comes from a senior computer science student based in California. And she's asking, what challenges does someone from the US that is interested working and contributing to emerging fields of cybersecurity, smart infrastructures, and sustainable technology in Europe and Middle East, Africa? She was looking from something in this area.
Well, I mean, I sourced from California, so I used to work at Cisco Systems, so that should be said. So I come from Silicon Valley per se, but although I'm a dual citizen, I'm Swiss and US, I would say, look, I think it's more understanding. You're coming from an area that already there's a lot going on in that space, but we all share the same. Having been in the United States quite recently, we all share the same opportunities, particularly in Europe, particularly in EMEA. And I think it's more the discussion about not having a dependency, I would say, an innovation dependency upon one another, but being able to be very unique in a space such that you can actually look at sharing value add, what your value add proposition is from Europe, from the Middle East, and so on and so forth. So it's an opportunity, and I think there's lots to go on. I think that conversation will continue to continue, in my opinion. Thank you.
We have just another question regarding what is the blockchain? It probably is a young student.
Oh, yeah. So that's a
Short
longer discussion.
explanation because only 2 minutes.
Yeah. So think about blockchain as the underpinning technology that actually runs your sort of digital crypto per se. It's actually solving for puzzles. Think about it as an Excel sheet or where um, you're watching not an Excel sheet, but in terms of watching expenses going in and expenses going out. And I received a degree a master's degree in digital currency and blockchain in 2019. So it's this area, especially with some of the regimes or some of the governments, is really coming up very much, particularly in the United States, and I think Europe is absolutely kind of looking at it. Other governments are looking at it.
We have 1 minute. Many questions are coming now, but
Well, that's exciting. I'm glad I'm hitting it off, so that's great. I think the slides are.
The slides and the recorded will be available so that after this workshop, yes, after the panel, what area of project you think is better started for beginner students? But no time. It's time to close, so sorry for that. But it's very interesting. Thank you, Monique. A
Thank you,
lot of
everyone.
interest from the audience.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We have to
Bye-bye.
go. See you next
Bye-bye.
time. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everyone.